Hello, I'm here to show you how to make a pinch pot. The first thing you're going to do to make your pinch pot is you're going to start with a nice ball of clay. In order to make your clay into a ball form, you would just pass it back and forth between your cupped hands. You want to make sure that you keep your hands cupped. If your hands are flat, you'll end up getting flat areas on your ball of clay. If you are having any weird lumps or bumps, you can kind of just paddle those down with your hand. My clay right now has been wedged already, and it is a really nice plasticity. It is super consistent, it's very moldable, and so it's perfect to work with and make a pinch pot. So now that I've got my ball of clay, the first thing I'm going to do is take my thumb and push my thumb into the ball of clay, like this. And once it's in, almost to the base, there's probably this much space left between my thumb and the bottom of the clay. I'm actually going to start going around what I call the basement of a pinch pot. And I'm just going to pinch evenly, kind of distributing an even amount of pressure as I go around in the very, very bottom of my pinch pot. Once I've gone all the way around, sometimes I'll circle around again, and then I will move up to what would be like the first floor, and I will do another layer of pinching up here. I'm trying to keep the pinching even. If I'm noticing a lot of pressure and I'm getting huge finger indentations, I try to move my fingers closer together to keep the pot as flat as possible. If I'm noticing any areas are bumping up, I can kind of push them down, and my thumb is inside to apply pressure outward, and that will keep the pot from collapsing. So now that I've gone around the first floor, I move up again. This whole time, I am not pinching around this top area here, because what would happen if I did that is I could potentially get too thin of a lip on my pinch pot. So I've gone around again, and now I'm going to move up here. I still am not pinching this very, very edge. And I'll move all the way around the pinch pot here. And what I'll do now is I'll just kind of examine the pot, and I'll look for any bumps or lumps. I'm going to kind of move my hand around it and see if there's any areas that are too thick. I'm hoping for the pinch pot to be about 1/4 inch thick to 1/2 inch thick up here on the walls, and then also here on the base. So I'm going to continue rotating, and I'm going to go around again, just searching for any thick areas where I will pinch a little bit harder. I'm never setting my pot down and working with both hands on it, because what tends to happen then is the piece of clay flattens out and you end up with a really shallow bowl, or perhaps almost even a plate. So I want to make sure I'm keeping this in my hands. And then if the form is getting too wide up on the top, I can use my hands to kind of collar back in and kind of squish the top back together, so that the opening isn't too big. And I'm pretty satisfied with the thickness of my pot right now. It did start opening up a little bit right here, that the top started opening, so I can collar that back in. And then whenever I'm working around the top, I always kind of tilt my hands inward like this, so that the top doesn't open too much, because you can always open it up more, but it's hard to go back from that. So I'm pretty happy with this right now. So what I can do now is make any changes to the form. As you can see, there's like an indentation here. So I can kind of observe it from different angles, and I can paddle out any areas that are too lumpy or bumpy. And when I start paddling, it's also going to change the consistency of the clay, and it'll remove my fingerprints, and it'll give us this really nice smooth surface, which is lovely. So I'm going to go around my pinch pot kind of paddling and rotating. If you notice, when I set my pinch pot down, I did not set it down on what is eventually going to be the bottom of the pinch pot, because I'm not sure yet exactly how flat I want the base to be. So I would complete the pot just using my hands, and if I needed to set it down, I would set it down upside down like this. And I would continue working on this to smooth it out and to make it even, rotating it in my hands, observing it, trying to find any areas that I was dissatisfied with for probably 5 more minutes before I would become satisfied with the overall form. I'm not going to do that right now though, because it would be boring to watch. So what I would do now that I've paddled it and it is in the basic form that I want is I would take a slightly dampened sponge and I can just start removing any unwanted textures so that I have a nice, clean, flat, lovely surface to work with. This sponge will not move any big indentations like this one here. I would want to do that actually before I started using the sponge, but I didn't notice that. If I do have a big indentation, I can apply pressure with my fingers on the inside, and I can either use my fingernail and just kind of glide over that, and that will correct it, or I can use a wooden box tool like this, glide over like that, repaddle, and then that little mark is completely gone, like it was never there. But the sponge won't remove big cracks. You have to remove those either with a tool or your fingernail. And then you would go with the sponge. And so this is my completed pinch pot right now. The inside is fairly smooth already. You can go over it with the sponge on the inside if you'd like, until it looks the way you want it. Now, if I was making this as a practice pinch pot, what I would do is I would actually cut it in half so that I could examine the walls. If I was keeping this pinch pot, I would store it upside down like this on my plasti bat, on my newspaper, inside of a bag until the next time I could come back to class, when I would either attach another pinch pot to it, maybe I'd add feet, or I would make the determination about how I wanted to present the pinch pot.